Okay, all right, Sid, you are welcome to share your screen and take it away for setting up Teachers for Success with RISE.
Excellent. Okay, let me.
Unless you want me to share my screen, whichever is easier.
No, I would happy to share it so then I can click through some of the. Just make sure. I don't think I can share. Oh, share screen. I can. Let's see. Share. Okay, good. Can you guys see? I have just the slide deck open right now. All right. So, well, first of all, thanks for having me back. I'm excited to be here with you guys again. And I know many of you asked when I came before and talked about Keep stuff, many of you asked to get login information in Data Gateway for Keep. I think that's happened for everyone who has asked for that so far. If you still don't have the ability to log in to the Data Gateway and look at Keep data, feel free to shoot me an email. We'll check again with our data and statistics team, but I think we got everybody signed in for that now. But today we wanted to talk about RISE. So Molly, I think, got an email from one of you guys about helping out some of your teachers with RISE, and specifically talking with your third grade teachers and your experience not having been in third grade or above. And so having some questions about RISE and how can you help teachers know what's there and what's available. So that's kind of what we're going to look at over the next 20, 30-ish minutes. But the first thing on this first slide in the deck is just the link to the Utah RISE portal. So RISE is the assessment system. It tests students in content, ELA and writing, then math and science starting in 4th grade. But ELA and math start in 3rd grade. So for the RISE system, you can see there's a link here to utahrise.org. Move this so I can open up my new screen. Actually, I'll just click on my link here. Okay, so when you come to the utahrise.org page, there's a few things. So in the slide deck, you can see there are, actually, sorry, let me move this just so I can see better. I want to move my slide deck and I can't quite see it because of this. Sorry guys, hold for 1 second. Let me stop sharing for just 1 second so I can move my screens around and be able to see both what I'm seeing on the screen and also the actual slide deck. So I have my notes. Okay. Oops. Didn't move exactly how I wanted it to, so I'm not exactly sure what to do next. So sorry. Hold with me just 1 second. Let me see if it'll. Sorry, Sarah, just 1 second, everyone. I moved my screen over and then now it's just gone black. So I'm going to try one more time to get my screen up here and then get my link to the slide deck. I'm pretty sure that's our slide deck. Okay, now I've got it. I can share my screen. This one. Okay, can we see now the shared screen? Okay, perfect. So on the utahrise.org webpage, the RISE portal, there's a couple of things that are good to know for you or good to know as you're working with teachers. One of the questions we get asked a lot is how do we help students, especially 3rd grade students who are new to the system, know how to use all the tools or what the test will look like or how to just navigate through the system. So the first place we recommend sending people to is the training tests. So you can see this little bike, it has training wheels on them. This is the training test. This is open, it's not locked, it's available for anybody to use. They could do it from home, they can do it from any computer as long as they come to this utahrise.org portal. So if you go to the training test, the test administration system is to look at how a teacher would create a test. So if they needed practice with, as a teacher, I'm going to go in and how do I set up a test for my students to take? You can try that test administration system. For students to be able to log in and see what are the different item types that I'm going to see on the test, or How do I use any of the tools that are available? They would use the training test. So I would highly recommend teachers have students try this out at least once before they go in for the real deal when they go in to take the RISE assessment. But each student can log in from their computer. You would sign in. It walks through choosing a grade level because there are different test selections for the different grade level. I'm going to choose a 4th grade because then we'll have science tests available as well. So you can see here's all the different training tests that are available for the students to see, especially if you have students that use Braille. You can test out their Braille systems if they have a refreshable Braille user or something like that. There are Braille assessments to test, but then also just the regular a general ed assessment. So for reading and listening, you can see because I selected 4th grade, the training tests are grade banded. So you can see these are 3rd through 5th grade or 4th through 5th grade through science. The training tests are not meant to be, here's a practice that content that would be specific to 3rd graders. The training tests really just are, how do I get to know the system? What do I click? Where do I put my notes? How do I submit a test? How do I just get to know the system? So they can play with, the students can set color choices. Sometimes they go in and change everything and have a black background with white text, and that gets bothersome, and then they can come back and change it. But this is where you can go in and set any assistive technology that a student might need or anything like that. You would check to make sure that the audio is working. Oh, whoops, I didn't, my text to speech check. They can adjust their volume, the rate of how quickly, or the pitch of the voice that's being read in the text to speech. And then they would move into the actual assessment. So working through with the kids, letting them play around with this so they don't want to take the time when they're actually testing to mess around with things, or having that available so they know what things they can adjust within the system. Then once you get into what a training test looks like, this is exactly how the general assessment is set up within ELA. So they're passage based. So the passages are on the left-hand side of the screen. If you want it to be bigger to be able to see the whole passage at one time, they can expand the screen. And the screen is getting blocked. There we go. Or you can retract it back and see the question at the same time as the stimulus material. With ELA, everything is text to speech except for reading the actual passage. Since we're looking at reading comprehension, can they understand what they're reading? They don't have text to speech. They do have to read the passages on their own, but they can play with all the different tools that are available to them on the assessment system. So if they wanted to hear the question, they could have it read aloud to them by saying speak question. If they want to use any of the tools like the highlighting tool, they can either click that hamburger menu or they can right click, either way, and any of the tools will come up. They can highlight things. They could highlight in the text if they wanted to, if there was something specific on the text that they wanted to highlight. So the training test is a really great place for students to learn the tools. The other tools that are available, if the student is not sure about this item type, so this is like a matching item type, and they're like, gosh, I don't really know. This would come in more if there's like a drag and drop one. And then the student was just like, I don't know how to do this. They can pull down this little hamburger menu and there's a tutorial, there's a little video. There's no sound with the videos, but it kind of walks through, here's how you would do a matching item. It tells you step by step, how would I answer this type of question. This is available on the training test, but it's also available on the actual assessment. If they come to a question they don't know how to interact with the question, there's that video tutorial. They also have a masking feature where if you're like, I don't know if it's easier on a multi-select or a multi-choice item, but they can draw a little mask that covers things up and it doesn't move. So once you've drawn it, it stays there. You can either delete that mask that you've drawn or get rid of it by clicking that masking button. There's also a dictionary available that includes a thesaurus. So you would click on the dictionary button and it brings up Merriam-Webster dictionary. I could look up a word from the text that I wasn't sure. And it would give me the pronunciation as well as the definition of that word. There's also a thesaurus available, and there's also a Spanish level language dictionary. So if you have students that are newer to English or Spanish learners or multilingual students, but Spanish is one of their languages, they can click on Spanish and it would give them a translation of the word in Spanish. If students speak another language besides Spanish, they can have their own language dictionary with them, like at their seat. So that's all available on the dictionary tool. Students can make notes. If they're like, oh, I'm not sure about this, I'd like to type a note in here. And they can keep any of the notes. These notes follow them from question to question. So whatever they type in the notepad is they go to question 2, and there was something else that they wanted to look at from the notes. The notes stay for each of the questions as they're taking a test. There's also a line reader that you can put up if a student like typically uses something to block out the other text, then you can use that line reader. It doesn't read it aloud to them, but that can help them to kind of focus their attention to the line that they're reading. And then there's also zoom in and zoom out tools right there. If they click on the system setting, they can adjust, like if they set the volume real high, or if they set the rate to be really fast and then they're like, wow, that's too fast. And instead of having to go back out and start all over again, they can hit this little system setting button and adjust that as they're going along. Then up here, you can see there are 12 questions on this training test. So the students in ELA, all of the questions that are associated with that passage come up at one point. So if they wanted to kind of look through questions, they could. If they were like, oh, wait, I wanted to see where that question was and answer that one first, for some reason, that's all things that they can do on the ELA test. On math and science, the questions come up one at a time because they're computer adaptive by one question. ELA, they're adaptive by passage. So all of the questions that go along with that passage come up at the top, and they can see how they're doing here. Once they answer questions, they can also see up here, and they can navigate. Here's all the questions that have been completed so far. So in ELA, it brings up all the questions. These have these little red arrows because that means they've been unanswered, and they can't move past this group of questions until they answer all of the questions. So a student wouldn't be able to just blow through things without actually answering. I mean, they can just come through and click buttons and click to the next one, but they can't just click through whole sections or the whole test at a time. They can also flag if they think, wait a second, I'm not sure if that's the answer. I want to mark that one and I'll come back to it later. So I marked number 3. You can see up here, there's a little tag, like you folded the page down to note, hey, this one you wanted to come back to. But also when you review the items, it shows the little flag. Here's number 3. So even if you move past this passage, the student could come back to the flagged one. And at the end, before they submit their whole test, they would also be able to, they also see something like this for all 50 or so questions that they have that shows the flags for any of the ones that they wanted to come back and review. Let's see, I think that was everything with the training test. So really the training test, again, is not for content specific knowledge, but just to get to know, here's all the different tools that we have available. There's one other tool that's on multiple choice, is the strike through tool. If they say, oh, you know what, I know it's not this one and I know it's not this one. So then I'm not sure, then I can narrow it down if they wanted to use that strike through tool. Any questions so far? I know that's kind of a lot of info so far on the training test. Okay, let me then go back to our main page. And just need to pull my screen thing down. Oops, leave. Okay. trying to get my thing out of the way so I can see all of everything that's on the page. So training tests are where students can go and practice. The other things that are available on this main page at utahrise.org, the first thing is looking over here along the left-hand side. If you're looking for resources for the teacher, if you're trying to download RISE reports and look at how student performance was on the assessment, you would click on the reporting system. If you're going to actually create and manage operational tests, that's in the test administration system. If you need to look at users and helping to make sure you have teachers set up and students set up within the system, that's where that is. These last two are things that you would probably use. So these other ones down here, most likely not as much, maybe the reporting one, but the other two you probably wouldn't use as much. But these other two might be good resources to help your teachers recognize, here's a way that my students can, that I can know more about the assessments, and then how I can help my students prepare and and monitor how they're doing with the standards throughout the year. So with RISE, there are three different, with our balanced assessment system, we have three different types of assessment that are all in the RISE system. So the first is the main one, is a summative test, which the window just opened a week or so ago. So that's open now with the RISE summative assessment system. The other two parts of RISE are more of our informative or formative assessments. So we have benchmark assessments and interim assessments. So the interim assessment is something that you can give twice a year, and it mirrors the blueprints that are on the summative test. So the same percentages of what students would see about a reading informative passage and the same DOK percentages, they would see that in the interim assessments, just on fewer actual questions. So it's not as long as the summative system. They're usually, I think, probably closer to like 30-ish questions, where the summative is typically 50-ish to 60, depending on the grade level. And I'll pull up those numbers because I don't quote me on the exact numbers. Generally, they're around 50 questions per grade. But the interims are the same percentages that you would see on the summative test, but something that you could use throughout the year. Some people like to do it kind of at the beginning-ish of the year and in the middle of the year, just as take a look at how students are doing on that day with what they know. I hesitate to say it could be a prediction for the summative assessment, but you do get a scale score that you could see, okay, as far as how the students are doing with these questions, you can kind of gauge they're are typically doing better with these reporting categories than other reporting categories. So an interim is something that can kind of give you an indication of how students are doing along the year, knowing that they might not have had, especially like in math or something, they might not have had instruction on all of those skills or standards yet. So then the third assessment type that we have on the RISE test is the benchmarks. The benchmarks are really helpful because they are associated at the strand level. So they're like quick checks when you finish a unit. So one of the things you can do is look in this benchmark module previewing system. Now I want to note here, there's these three sections that are locked. You have to have a login, but you can get a login as long as you're associated like with the school and stuff. So you would click on this benchmark module preview if you wanted to show, you know what, I just finished this lesson on fractions or on, I don't know, something with ELA, and you want to see how are students doing with that specific skill or standard that I've just taught. That's when a benchmark would be helpful. So the benchmark module previewing system just shows you every single benchmark that's available. And so what would be assessed? So you could say, oh yeah, my kids, we've taught these standards. These questions meet what the students know. So I want to see who has it. So you can check in third grade. These are all of the benchmark modules, that are available in third grade. You can see there's editing, 2 in editing, 4 informational passage sets that have questions along with them. some listening, some literature passage set, and then we move into math. We have measurement and data and geometry. So you can take a look at, let's just look at the listening one. So this is where a teacher could go in and preview any of the benchmarks that are available at it's called the reporting category, but it's kind of like a group of standard levels. So this is a listening set where it's just this listening passage, and then there are 3 questions that go along with that listening passage. So within that benchmark module previewing system, the teachers would be able to look to see, is there something that I've assessed, and would give my kids practice with taking an assessment similar to what they would see on the summative, and also give me an idea about what the questions kind of look like that would be on summative. So the questions that are in the benchmark and interim banks are the same pool of questions. So if teachers are using the benchmarks, then I wouldn't recommend that they also use the interims, because the kids may overlap questions because they come from the same bank. I find the benchmarks to be more helpful for a teacher level. The interim is good to know, but especially like in math, where there are things that I haven't taught yet, it's hard to spend that much time on an assessment that I know most of them wouldn't have those skills yet. So I think if I were going to recommend something to teachers, I would recommend benchmarks, because they're at that more granular level, and would be something that you could give to students at the end of specific instruction. So those are the benchmarks. It's nice, the system that you can go through and see, okay, here's the actual questions that students will see. Now the questions, we've had people ask, like, we'll do the benchmark questions. I heard that they were rejected.
Going to be doing
Summative questions or something like that. And that's not the case. They weren't rejected. They were originally part of our summative system, but we wanted to offer some more practice for people, or a look throughout the year. So we split the bank. So the summative bank is separate, and then we have these benchmark questions, but we didn't say like, oh, these were just the bad questions. That's what we got for benchmarks. They were all part of the same system. And really, we just made sure we could meet our blueprints on the summative system. And then anything else we brought over to the benchmark system. So that's available there. And then the last thing I wanted to show you was this resource section. Within the resource section, there are lots of good pieces of information that would be possibly helpful things for you as you're helping teachers to look through what exactly is on the RISE assessment. One of the biggest things to look at are these 2 right here, the RISE cut scores and the RISE blueprint. So this cut scores is just a PowerPoint. Oh, it's something I have to download too, but it's a PowerPoint that shows math, science, and ELA, and what are the exact cut scores for the scale scores of where 1, 2, 3, or 4 would be. So that's helpful to have on hand as you're looking at, oh wow, these students were close to being at this other level. Then the other thing is the RISE blueprints. The blueprints are helpful because they show what are the percentages that each grade level is being assessed on. So in 3rd grade, there are 43 operational items. There are usually about 10 field test items as well. But as far as what the students are scored on, there are 43. So I would make sure you know, it's not that the students will only see 43 questions or items. There will likely be roughly 10 field test items. So their assessment will be about 53 items that they will see. You can see these blueprints for each grade level. They're kind of grouped all together, and then they're also by grade. So you can see, okay, about 33% of the test in 3rd grade is on reading literature, 33 is on reading informational, 16 on listening, and 19 on language. And then also, even though the assessment is computer adaptive, it's adaptive by difficulty of, like in ELA, the difficulty of the text. That's what's adaptive. Students will all still see multiple levels of DOK questions. So even if they're at the lower end of reading for the grade level and reading like the easier passages, they would still have 24 to 34% of their tests would be DOK 3 questions. So the DOK, depth of knowledge, is not adaptive within the assessment. It's more about the actual text of what they're reading. So those blueprints are something that's helpful to take a look at the different grade levels, and the earlier grades all look similar. Once you get into 7th and 8th grade, you can see that there's a higher percentage of informational text versus literature text. And then, let me see, writing rubrics are the other thing that are up here. If you are looking at what is the writing being scored on, writing is only assessed on the summative assessment in 5th and 8th grade, but there are benchmark writing modules available for 3rd through 8th grade. So if you have people that are interested in looking at writing and having the writing scoring, that's available, and you can see the rubrics that they're being scored on here. And then finally, this user guide folder, the things within the user guide that would be helpful, the test administration manual, or the TAM, is something that you would need to have if you're administering the assessment. Kind of walks through everything about the assessment. It's pretty big. If you're looking at just how do I look at my reports, how do I set things up, this RISE reporting user guide is fairly helpful in looking at how do I know how to set things up. If I'm a teacher, how do I filter things down so I can see things within the system? So there's a huge how to set up the reports so they make sense. It's a big thing at the beginning, but then kind of walks you through with screenshots. What are things that I would need to do to filter through the reports to really take a look from a teacher level at aggregate data. That's a whole lot of information. Any questions with RISE? I don't want to take up too much more time because I know we've taken a lot of time already, but if you have questions, I'm happy to answer any questions or to follow up with anything through email.
Oh, this was great. Thanks, Sid.
Oh, great. Let me stop sharing.
Thanks, Sid. We really appreciate you coming in and sharing that information. And thank you to those who emailed us on sort of what you wanted to chat about this month. So thanks for that. Yes, thanks so much for coming, Sid. Just a quick reminder to everyone that the first week of April, you need to submit your quarterly time and effort certification reports to your RESA. So make sure, I know we already sent you an email reminder, and I'm sure you already have a calendar reminder, but just wanted to give that verbal reminder again about that first week of April since it's coming up here soon. Oh, Jason, welcome. Yes, go ahead.
Sarah, I've been not turning them in and just collecting them, and then when I do a submission in Utah Grants, I've been putting them in that way. Is that okay?
Yeah, I think
I've
that's
got I've got all the quarterly ones signed, and I have them here at Q's, and then I'll upload them. I'm going to do a submission.
Oh, great.
The first week of April. Does that work?
Yeah, that'll be great.
Okay.
Thanks, Jason. All right, I'm also going to put the link to the slides and handouts really quick. So I know we had a couple join really quick, so I want to make sure that you have that. So that link will send you to the slides and handouts. And then I'm just going to share my screen here. All right, so as you can see, we have 3 different handouts today. So just wanted you to be aware of that and looking at the slides. Okay. I don't want to share them fully only because if I do, then I can't see your chat questions and then I feel bad. So let's move to successes and challenges. So we are opening up to you, and I'll actually stop sharing my screen so we can have this conversation as a group. But what accomplishments are you most proud of? What challenges are you facing? And then how can the group support you? So I'm going to stop sharing just so that we can all see each other's faces and have that conversation on what's going really well. What are some things you need support on, and what can we do to help you?
Well, Jenny and I are excited because we finished our facilitator training for letters, and we've been able to do trainings in 3 different districts so far. So that's been exciting, and we're scheduling with a 4th district. So
that is so exciting. And how are you feeling? How are they going?
Really well.
One is great.
Yeah.
Tune it down.
But we were even warned that some of the teachers were resistant and not sure they really wanted to jump into this heavy lift and why did they have to do it. But it's funny that as we get into the brain science and we're talking about those theoretical models, all of a sudden their eyes are lighting up and they're like, where was this information all along? And they want us, well, tell me this and this and this. And we're like, some of that you're going to have to wait on just a little bit. Call us in, coach, and we'll get you ahead of the game a little bit. But they're so excited about the information that they're getting.
Oh, that is wonderful to hear. That's so exciting. Well, congratulations on being done. I know you guys had one wrap up today, even just a moment ago. So very exciting to hear that. And I'm so glad. I know Cindy has also shared how well Letters has been received in Garfield. So exciting to hear that from multiple spaces. And yes, so glad that we could celebrate that accomplishment with you guys.
Okay, we do actually have one more thing that just because we're concluding, or we just finished this last week. So in our region, because we have 7 different school districts, we took all of the instructional coaches bi-monthly and we did a training with all of the coaches and had a coaching PLC network. And we had really, really good feedback from the coaches. They just want us to keep doing it because they feel like they're so isolated in their buildings that it's so nice for them to come together and have a place for, PLC and some collaboration with some of their peers. And they just said, please don't stop.
Oh, I love this. I love that we were sharing 2 really awesome, amazing accomplishments. So kudos to you both. This is so great. If we could just do around, I mean, those are some pretty exciting things that are, being done. And I love that the feedback is really positive and they're like, don't stop. This is the best. I'm so happy for you guys. Congratulations. That's wonderful.
Can I ask a question really fast? I'm going to start the letters training to be a national letters trainer. I'm just wondering how it went and if any advice you have or anything like that would be great.
So are you just starting the facilitator training? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Well, just a heads up with that. You anticipate that they're going to take you through how to teach each session and take you deep into the content for each session. And that is not what it is at all. So it takes a lot of extra homework and work on your part to be able to get that knowledge. But it is so rewarding and to see those pieces come together and how you can apply it and then how it empowers teachers. But just plan, it's a heavy lift, but it's definitely worth it.
And you will do just fine, but something that we actually have enjoyed is presenting together because the energy shifts, you kind of, when we're trading spots and trading information and we both have different backgrounds and different experiences that we can share with people, the energy shifts with people and we can keep the energy going all day long instead of having, lulls in the day. And that's been really fun to be able to present with somebody, especially initially. And maybe that would be something I would think about is at least initially, maybe partner up a little bit until you get really firm with extra experiences and the slides and things like that.
Right. Thank you. That's great advice. Thank you so much.
Yeah, so I can say with my team too, in the presentations that they've done in the various areas of the state, they have shared that some of them absolutely love co-presenting. They just think that's the best because you get kind of a breather once in a while. You can maybe even go to the bathroom, much like when you're teaching, you don't always have time. So it's kind of nice to have a partner to rely on that space. And another thing that's kind of come up just because of, COVID has been, if one is sick, then someone can still, it can still happen. And so that's been really beneficial in that space as well. But definitely, it is a heavy lift. It's not, the extra 8 days are not super deep. This is exactly how it is. It gives you sort of the gist of what you need. But even like the materials are things that you kind of have to look around for. You probably have them being in the, an educator space, but you sort of have to gather them on their own. So keeping those things in mind, it is a little bit of a lift, but definitely rewarding and exciting. And I know as presenters, it's exciting to hear that excitement and see those moments that Jenny and Harmony were just sharing, so that you can receive that sort of verbal and nonverbal feedback from the group that you're working with, and it's really beneficial. And you know, even bringing out your own passion for early living, it's pretty exciting.
So Sarah, this might be a question for you, and I know it seems like forever since the legislature it was out, but I was sitting in a meeting the other day with some teachers and their director, and she stated that one of the legislative bills said that they had to, and I am quoting this, I'm not paraphrasing, but they had to get rid of all of their produced materials and teacher paid teachers. So I think there's been some miscommunication. She looked at me to confirm that, and I said, I haven't read that one. And so when I talked to Duke, he's like, I haven't read that one. So is there a bill? Is there some miscommunication where she's coming from on this? Can you clarify?
So yeah, she's talking about Senate Bill 127. So Senate Bill
Okay.
127 has about 26 different projects tied to it. One of them is that educators in our state need to be using, let me see, because I have it, it's defined. So let me just pull it up really quick so I can make sure that I'm giving you the right information. I have it in another PowerPoint slide, so I can quickly grab it.
Oh, great, thanks.
Okay, so yeah, SB 127, so it requires LEAs to provide instructional materials that are evidence informed if it's core, so that's like your core basal, your tier 1, and evidence based if it's intervention or supplemental. And so those are both defined in the code, and I'm gonna put those definitions in the chat box really
Perfect.
quick. And so the reason it's evidence informed for like the tier 1 basal core is because generally like your Wonders program isn't generally run through a pretty intensive, you know, like process to determine is there statistical significance that it works for kids. Like it's not like that, but intervention programs are run through that type of model to determine if they really do work for kids or not. That's why you'll see like the intervention programs are really around a lot of them are scripted. The reason they're scripted is because they've been through this, you know, reporting and evidence and some kind of quasi-experimental study to say, yep, this works for kids, but only if you use it exactly like this. If you don't use it exactly like this, then we didn't have outcomes, or the outcomes were not great enough to be statistically significant. And so that's why it's not quite the same for core. It's a little bit different in that space. And so, yes, if people are using like teacher pay teachers or Pinterest, there is no evidence basis on those. Generally a lot of copyright issues with those spaces. And so yes, now it depends on what they're doing, because obviously if you're using Pinterest to like decorate your room, you know, I mean, no.
I think some of the teachers that were showing, like, the biggest concern was they use it for maybe center work, or they've built things, you know, that kind of stuff. And I really didn't have the answer for them. I assumed that it was, because I hadn't read this specific bill, but I assumed it was something to do with the core and the tier instruction interventions for sure, but I didn't know what to tell them. So
yeah, so I mean, anything that they're using is going to have to be based off of, depending on whether it's intervention or core. Any materials that they're using are going to have to be based off of those two definitions. So if they don't meet those requirements, then no, they are not allowed to use them by law.
perfect.
So that will be a potential shift for some. Mm-hmm.
Or no, that's great to have that specific bill, because I couldn't find it. And so that's great. Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome.
Sarah, can we just continue on that for just a minute?
Of course.
I was up at Rich County and a similar thing, they were asking me about it. And their district did a grant this year where each teacher did a large project. And they have created lots of, I don't know, center type materials, intervention stuff. It's gone through a kind of an approval process within their school district. But so they were asking me, they were all panicked because they've spent hours and hours. So I don't know. I didn't have the answer either, but it has to go back to this, I guess.
It does. So if the district did a well-designed, well-implemented experimental study where there was strong evidence, which is the 0.4 or higher effect size or moderate, then yes, they could. I don't know what kind of process Rich did, if they did, like a quasi-experimental study or not. If it was just someone reviewed it and said, these are great, then that's not really going to meet the requirements of that legislation.
Can they do action research based?
They wouldn't be able to, I don't think so, because they can't use anything that doesn't meet these standards.
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry. Any other questions on that?
Yeah, I have a question. So like if somebody's using 10 frames in their centers, like, I mean, is it teachers' responsibilities now to like go out and find the studies that show that the center materials they're using now have like evidence-based? Like,
No, so that is on the district or charter. That is not on the teacher to do that. And 10 frames obviously are math, so this is only for literacy. So there's no alignment to the law and math. This is just for literacy and specifically for K3, because that's how it's written in the bill. So if it's early literacy, if it's in that space, then the district or charter are the ones that are letting them know what they can and can't use. And then as far as how the state is providing support in that space, an expert literacy panel will be created, and they will be creating a list so that here are the core materials, here are the intervention materials that they meet these requirements, so that districts and charters don't have to go out and find that on their own either. So we're providing that space, but obviously if a teacher came to me and said, hey, can I use this? I would be like, go back to your district or charter. All right. Like I would send them back to all of you lovingly, because more than likely what generally happens and what we find out is when teachers contact us, it's generally because they didn't really love the answer that they got from their district or charter. And so then it puts us in a weird space if we say yes and the charter said no, or vice versa, or the district said no and we said yes. That's just, we don't want to get in that kind of situation, because we're on the same team. So we are here to support you. So we want to make sure that we're doing that in the best way that we can. So that's how we're supporting. We're hoping to have that list done within the next couple months so that you all can have it ready before school starts. The expert panel obviously has to be created first. And so we're contacting and reaching out to people like Tim Shanahan and Louisa Motes to see if they would be willing to be on our Utah expert panel. And so once we have that built, their first task is to do that list so that you guys can have that as quickly as possible, because we've heard from LEAs that they said of all of these different 26 projects, that's really the thing that we need to happen like right away. And so we said, got it, we can make that happen. So that's kind of the first project we're working on to get done for all of you to be supportive.
Hey, can I just make a comment about that really fast, Sarah?
Yeah.
I think we are promoting evidence-based, evidence-informed tools and instruction. And I think there are a lot of teachers who are very tied to teachers pay teacher things that they use in their classroom every day. But the fact is that those things are not necessarily working. And that's why we're doing what, I think that's why this bill is so important. And let's just draw a line in the sand. Let's just do it. Let's just get rid of some of these practices and things that are not working. And let's go with what we know is evidence-based and evidence-informed, and let's kind of cheerlead that for the districts and schools that we work with, instead of making it a problem. Let's be like, this is a good thing. This is going to benefit our kids. This is, we want this. So anyway, just my 2 cents.
Yeah, I really like how you're looking at leading this out and being in support, because it's required. It's required by law. The governor has signed it, so it's a requirement. And obviously it's a requirement that like all of our bills they're not funded until July 1. So while it's in law, this is getting people prepared for next school year, right? And so I love that you know, rather than saying, well, this is something our legislators are making us do now, you're picking the more positive route for your teachers and just saying, hey, let's have this conversation. Let's talk about this. Let's be really positive and let's talk about how great this is going to be for kids. Because honestly, that's why we're all in education, is for kids. That's why we go to work every day, right? It's not because we're getting rich in education. It is for tiny humans because we love them. We want them to succeed, and we will do anything and everything to make that happen, right? So I love that you are taking such a positive frame on that. That's really great to see. Thank you. Okay, so I was just thinking, quick wonder. So one of the requests for today was around goals and how we help LEAs set goals. And so I'm happy to go through that, but I'm also wondering, because I already have slides prepared for other things around SB 127, would it be beneficial to go over SB 127 and the sort of 26 projects that align with that? Would that be beneficial? And which is more beneficial? Because I'm looking at time and I'm like, I don't know if we have time for both. I will do my best to try and get through both, but which one would you prefer first? Would you want the literacy bill, or do you want to talk about how I help, or how we help LEAs set goals? Which one's more beneficial for you at this moment?
I think the bill for sure.
I think the bill would be helpful.
We've got bills. Okay. Let me just transition here real quick. Well, it'll just take a minute. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. Okay, and let me back it up because this is for a different presentation. Okay, so basically starts right about here. Okay, so Senate Bill 127, Early Literacy Outcomes Improvement, was run by Senator Ann Milner. And the intent of the bill was to achieve 70% of third grade students reading on grade level, according to our Lexiles, by July 1 of 2027. So what that means is, just for context, prior to COVID-19 learning disruptions, we were at 51%, and currently we're at 44%. So it is going to be a jump to get to 70, but can you imagine how great it would be to have, you know, almost 3/4 of our kids reading on grade level by the end of third grade? That would be so much better than the 44% we have now. The caveat to this is Senator Milner actually put this in the bill when she drafted it. And so that means that the 18-ish million that were aligned to these 26 different projects that I'm going to share with you, it means that if we don't meet that or get close to it by July 1 of 2027, the funding goes away. It's all just, whoop, we're not going to get that ongoing funding anymore. So the way this bill is split up, or at least the way I'm going to talk about it, is sort of the different implications. So we're going to start with instructional implications. So it will require our LEAs to administer diagnostic assessments to students in K-3 who are only to students who are scoring below or well below benchmark on Acadian's reading. So it's not for everyone, just the students who the universal screener of Acadian's reading is showing, boop, there's a problem. Let's take a little bit deeper look into that. It also requires LEAs to progress monitor to measure the success of the instruction or intervention. And this, I'm just going to go to this link so I can put it in the chat box for you all. But it shares the recommended frequency. I'll send the whole thing here, copy. But basically, excuse me, basically it is around, if they are scoring well below benchmark, it would be every 1 to 2 weeks of progress monitoring would occur. If they are below, it's every 2 to 4. Blue, you would not need to. Green would be, it's not that often. I want to say, I'd have to look it up in that thing again, but it's not that often. I want to say it's like once between benchmark sessions. So no, those two pieces will be coming into play. As far as what the things that we're going to provide as a state is Sid, who I think she jumped off probably already, but Sid and her team are creating a diagnostic assessment list, just so that people don't have to say, oh, what are the approved lists? There isn't an approved list, and we're not going to make you choose from the list. We're just creating a list to make sure that you know, here's a bunch of free ones, and here's a bunch that you may already have, they may already be part of your intervention program or whatever. So we're just creating a list in case you're wondering, do we already have one? And you just maybe don't call it a diagnostic assessment. Then you can check the list and be like, oh, we already have one. We're already using one. Great, that's the one we're going to use. We're not going to force you to buy a specific diagnostic assessment. That's not part of the bill at all. Any questions on that slide before I jump to the next set of projects? Okay. All right, so the next piece was the one we already talked about. So I'm going to sort of move through that because we already chatted about that a little bit. The next piece is around some professional learning implications, and there are a few slides on the professional learning implications. So one of them is it requires us at USB to provide optional statewide professional learning to support early literacy for coaches around like adult learning and job embedded coaching and family engagement, so that it's we're making sure that you have literacy instruction as well as these other things that make a really well-rounded coach. Some of you already have all of these things because you've sort of gone through the coaching endorsement and stuff. So it's, some of you are like, oh, I already did that anyway. It's not more work for me. And notice it is optional, so it is not a requirement. It's something that we would provide. We would also provide professional learning regional consultants to support the LEAs in designing, facilitating, monitoring, adjusting, and really doing, following all the professional learning standards of our state to make sure that whatever professional learning we're providing in our state is just really, really good and really meets the qualifications to align to those standards. So for example, we wouldn't do a one and done because that does not meet our professional learning standards. It would be like ongoing job embedded with coach professional learning to make sure that we're really, if we're going to take teachers out of the classroom, that whatever we're going to offer is so beneficial that it's worth that time and the sub plans, right? So we want to make sure that whatever we're providing is really great. So there will be approximately 10 regional consultants to support all of the LEAs in supporting this space. It also requires USB to provide, again, optional, statewide professional learning to support the use of collective efficacy. And that's really just building upon, it's obviously one of the #1 in effect sizes. And so we want to sort of build upon that. It would be linked to literacy because this is obviously a literacy bill, but in general, collective efficacy would be the main point. And again, we'll be offering it through 2027. So if this year is not the best year to have like your professional learning communities and school leadership teams join, then they can go the next year or the next year or whatever. So we'll be offering it for a while. The next piece is with professional learning implications. So it requires USB to develop and promote a website with resources so that we can support teachers and families in early literacy. And so that's something that we will be working on. That won't, obviously with all these other things going on, the literacy team at USB is me, the K-3 literacy specialist, which there are 3, and that's it. So there are not, we don't have a huge literacy like department like some state agencies. This is it. So we have to prioritize which ones to support and work on first. That will not be the first one just because it's not as impactful as all the other things we have going on. So know that that's not going to come immediately. The next one is requires USB to contract with one or more organizations in coordinating community resources to provide training and coaching to community areas. And so it'll be more around parent engagement. And so that's a space that we'll probably connect with our student support department in talking about how we can make that happen and then contract out with other organizations. It could be organizations such as like WestEd or United Way or different organizations and agencies that we've worked with in the past. So we'll be working on that. Again, not the most important thing, not like the #1 thing to be done, but it will come in time. The last bullet is that USB will provide grants to all of the districts and charters to provide required letters training. So it will be required. This is separate from what we're already running. So the proposal that I wrote over a year ago that the board approved, and that's where we have the 69 LEAs who were invited, and then we added, we're up to 88 or maybe it's 90 now because we had a wait list of people who wanted in even though they weren't invited. So this will be everyone else. So any K-3 general education or elementary special education teachers who have already not gone through we will be sending money to the LEAs so that they will be doing that because they will now be required by state law to go through it. So if there were any sort of naysayers in the LEAs that have already started that just said, I absolutely won't do it, now they have to. So this will include, that's all for letters, but then we also have letters for admin, which would be like the literacy district administrators, the elementary school principals and school psychologists. Coaches would still be, of course, also doing the letters, not the admin one, the regular letters, 3rd edition that you're all familiar with. And so with some exceptions, the exceptions are dual language immersion teachers in the target language. So if they're teaching only Russian or, whatever, they would not be required. If they are special education teachers who only serve severe students with significant cognitive disabilities, then they would not be required. And if they are teachers who are within 1 year of retirement, then they would not be required. So those are the exemptions. Any questions around that before I head to the last slide on professional learning implications?
I have a
That-
couple. Sorry, go ahead, Kayleen.
I just wondering, does that start next fall?
Yep, it will start next school year and it will be over 3 years.
Okay, Mike, I've got a couple questions for you, Sarah.
Yeah.
First of all, the funding for letters, does that mean the state will be paying for like the whatever, the couple $1,000s or whatever it is for each teacher through the
Yep, so
Voyager
it would be a grant through Utah Grants, and we would send each LEA the amount of money that they need for like the licenses and the books, which is like all the materials, and then also the sessions. And so we would be paying for all the different components, including the Bridge to Practice. So it'd still be the same 3 things that we're doing now. So it's
Yeah.
online work, Bridge to Practice, course,
Okay.
or session, right?
So, okay, that's great. So like if the districts were going to give a stipend for their teachers for doing it, that would not come from that grant. Is that correct?
Correct. You could still, or a district and charter could still use the professional learning grant for subs and stipends for this.
Okay, yeah.
So
okay,
it would
good.
still be, they'd still be allowed to use those funds or ESSER funds, there's other funding sources, but yeah,
Okay.
those would still be in place.
Okay, and then, sorry, I have so many questions. I was at the other meeting that you did last week about this, so I know
Oh,
I've met,
yes.
the literacy director meeting,
Literacy
and
director meeting?
I've met with my three districts already, talking about it, and
Oh,
they
great.
gave me a bunch of questions. So I thought, okay, good, I'll ask them now because then
Yes.
everyone else might get those questions. So the other one, what about because one of my schools I just actually got home from today is very rural, Daggett County School District.
Yeah.
They have aides who really support their tier 2 and tier 3. They don't really have teachers doing that, and they would like their aides to have letters training, but they wanted me to ask you if that is something that they could do.
We do not have enough funding for that, for all the paraprofessionals in our
Okay.
state. So if we had the funding, we would love to be able to offer that. We just don't have enough funding to go around for all of that.
Yeah, if it's something that the district paid for, is that a thing where paraprofessionals could get the letters training, or? it
Sure.
doesn't have to be a
Yeah. I mean,
teacher?
I don't know
Okay.
of any that are offering it, but I don't see why they couldn't. Are the paraprofessionals, are they certified teachers or not?
Well, one of them in particular is in the Apple
Oh, mhm, yeah, becoming a
program.
teacher. Yeah.
Becoming a teacher, and yeah, so I think there's, they have to kind of grow their own, their own.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that.
teachers in that. And so, yeah,
Well, I will say this, if I were stepping into letters and I was not a certified teacher, it would be really hard. I think my
Yeah.
background knowledge would really be lacking, and I would probably be overwhelmed. So I think that's something that they would want to be really mindful of if they decide to do that. So I would just
yeah.
let them
Have to be just the right person, probably, huh? That,
Yeah, I mean, I think all of you, have been in a situation where you're like, whoa, if I just knew nothing about how to teach kids how to read at all, this would be really hard to do. And so I just want to make sure that if we are going to do that, we are setting people up for success so they don't feel like
Yeah.
this is brain overload and I'm just shutting down. I'm getting nothing out of this because it's just too much. I don't have the background knowledge to access
Yeah.
it.
Okay.
want
I mean, are there people that it's not a brain overload for? Do they exist?
Yes, yes. I will say the majority of people in our state, at least on the pretest for units 1 through 4, have scores anywhere between like the 50s to 70s seems to be sort of the main space. We have had some really low ones, like an 8%, and we did have that was the lowest one that I saw, and then the highest, we had 2 people in the state score 100% on the pretest. So that was exciting. So I would say for some people, very few people, I would say, Amanda, but I would say the majority, it is a lot of information to take in. I think you're absolutely right in that assumption. I think it would be the majority.
Okay, you ready for my other 2 questions about it?
I'm ready.
One is, can the teachers receive any kind of like college credit for this training?
Oh, I love that question. So there are a few options. When the district contacts the vendor, which is Lexia, to begin the contract and receive materials and all of that, they actually are offering credit through a university. I do not remember the name of the university because it's obviously not a Utah one, but there is one that they are contracting with to do that. In addition to that, UVU and SUU in Utah, they're the only 2 I am aware of, are offering, they're not allowed to offer courses or credit that's specifically called out for letters because that's obviously illegal, because they're not actually offering it, but they are providing credit in spaces. It's just, it is for letters, they just can't call it that. So there is some room in that space.
Okay, great. And then I think this is my last one. Do we have data from other states that have their teachers have gone through the whole letters and we can show, the benefit?
Yeah.
Of doing
Yes, I actually trying to think of where I have that. Hold 1 second. Oh no, I'm not there. I know. I don't know what's it called. Yes, I have the link from Mississippi on the study that was done on their outcomes. It's in this.
I knew they had done it, so that's what I figured where it would come from.
There are a ton of states in it now.
Yeah.
Here it is.
Cool.
I'll put it in the chat box.
Thank you.
Copy. Okay. Okay, heading to the next one, we have the last slide for professional learning implications. So it obviously there was a line in there that requires LEAs to use only the evidence informed and evidence-based, and then requires USBE to provide mandatory professional learning in change management. So this is how to, affect and make good change for elementary principals, principal supervisors, a member of the LEA's leadership team, and the LEA's literacy specialist by 2027. So again, it is mandatory, but it doesn't have to be this year. So just know that it is a requirement, just not right away. So it's really looking at how do we make really effective change in a short amount of time, because obviously we're going to have only so many years to get to that 70, and we want to make sure that we're really having effective change in this space. And so that's why it's was included as part of the bill. So as far as the system supports, there's only one slide on the system supports. It requires USB to formally recognize LEAs who are really excelling and make sure that we're really, sort of spotlighting them, so to speak. And then also to support those who are not, so we're already doing that, requires us to supply state literacy coaches to the lowest performing schools. So we're going to be hiring anywhere from 25 to 35 state literacy coaches to actually be embedded in those lowest performing schools. They will actually be hired by the state, but they won't work at USBE. They will work in that school full time. And so then if that school, of course, sort of makes really good improvements and they're no longer lowest performing the next year, then we will move that coach to the next school. And so that's something that will be coming. We haven't hired for that yet, but I did work with Katie, who's going to be the supervisor in that space. And we'll put out the job posting for that. And so I know the job posting is being worked on because I helped her write the description. So those are to be coming, and we'll need to hire those here in the next couple months. And then USBE will create an expert panel, which I sort of mentioned a little bit ago, on the science of reading as a resource for USBE and for everyone else, in our state, to make sure that we're supporting early literacy. It also requires USBE to contract with an organization to provide books for in-home use for students in low-income families, and requires you lead the Center for the School of the Future, which is housed at USU, and the University-Based Research Center to collaboratively develop and maintain an evidence-based practices and intervention material list. And so they will be providing that. So that's just another resource that they will maintain and update to make sure that it's up to date every year. We've kind of started in that space, obviously, but we can't, it's not something that's required by law for us. So we just do it but it means it only gets updated every once in a while. So this will be really great for everybody. And then we're going to move on to higher ed implications. And there are 2 slides on this. So this bill also requires teacher candidates who are earning either their preschool, elementary, or special education license to pass the Foundations of Reading assessment for licensure, which that actually passed in 2020. The difference here is that when USBE submitted HB 114 in 2020, it said higher ed, and so it was just universities, not Apple programs. So it was like, whoops, we forgot Apple programs. But that was the same year that licensing was changing. So I think it was just, it changed and we didn't know and it was too late. So that was the change for this piece is, and of course, we're already piloting the assessment. So anyone coming out now is taking it, but they're not required to pass it until 24-25. That will be when it's required to be passed in order for you to be licensed. It also requires USBE to establish exemptions and a different pathway for the assessment. So we'll be working on that. And also design requirements for educator prep programs to make sure that they are providing the instruction in the science of reading. So this will be a big shift for our higher ed folks. It also requires educator prep programs to prepare teacher candidates to pass the Foundations of Reading assessment at no cost to the participant for up to 3 attempts. This is because the state pays for the first attempt. And then if they are unable to pass at that time, then the educator prep program has to support them in up to 3 more attempts for free. So that means the university is kind of stuck supporting this teacher until they get it right. So the accountability lies with them. In addition to that, we are doing a split for our higher ed institutions and to assist them in hiring faculty who actually have training in the science of reading, and also requires them that if they want, that they have to match the funds, and that the science of reading experts will serve on their hiring panel. So that's another big shift for higher ed. And then requires USBE to monitor the accreditation of the program. So what that means, if they have a low pass rate for the Foundations of Reading assessment for 2 consecutive years, they will no longer be allowed to develop teachers. They just will no longer have an ed preparation program. It will be removed from their university. So in other words, develop good teachers or no, or you won't be allowed to. And then also requires USBE to provide grants, and that's really just to pay for the teacher's first time taking the assessment. So that is all on that bill. Any additional questions on that? Like I said, it's a lot, and I just threw a whole bunch at you. So if you think of questions later, feel free to shoot me an email, because I don't expect you to be like, oh yeah, I have no questions. This is really easy. Because we're still like just this morning, someone from the team came to me and they said, what about this? And I'm like, oh, I don't know. We need to talk about that. We need to reread the bill and find out what the intent was there. And so there are going to be questions even that we can't answer yet, but we will find the answer. We will get it.
Sarah, I just have a question for you. I had heard conflicting things regarding us as if we get to become a national letters trainer, the ability to support the districts that we work with. I've heard different things like, yes, you can, no, you can't. So maybe you could clarify that for us.
Sure. So that's something that I think is still being discussed at USBE as to whether we are only going to allow for national trainers or if we can have state trainers. And it's really more of a discussion, not just at USBE, but with the vendor. They're pretty particular about who can receive like their certificates and everything. So they have some kind of rules around that space. So we still need to connect with them and determine what that will, what it will be. For sure, obviously national trainers will be required. State trainers, I'm not sure what they'll say on that yet. So we do not have outcomes on that discussion yet, but it is being discussed. So
But-
once we know, we'll definitely let people know.
Well, so if we become state trainers, because Jenny already said that they are, and they're
Yes.
supporting their schools that they work with, then that would give our schools the option, like we could work with our district
Yes.
schools if
I
we are a
know,
national
that would be
trainer.
so great. So
Okay.
So we'll see what the outcomes of that conversation are. We're not sure yet. Anything else from that bill? Okay, that was a lot. Sorry to move through that and it be a surprise. Okay, so then looking at the rest of what we planned to talk about today, I'm just gonna grab that again. Okay, so we have a little more than 15 minutes. So I'm gonna share my screen again. Okay, so back to the original. All right, so goals. As far as what the goals look like for next year, because you can see on here what we did for the current year. For next year, there will be a state growth goal for literacy at 60%, a state growth goal for math also at 60%. And then each LEA will need to write one goal for literacy, one for math, and then a third local goal. But that third local goal can either be math or literacy. It's totally up to the LEA and based on their data. So if an LEA is like, ooh, we are really low in math, that should probably be the third goal then. If it's literacy, it would be vice versa. So as far as how we help an LEA to determine what the goal should be, I put these in our handouts. So you have both of these. But we share these different longitudinal data analysis worksheets. One is composite and one is submeasures, and we have them do it ahead of time. And so once they have the data filled in, we walk them through what it looks like. So this is just an example. So you'll notice when we're looking at these data, we ask the question, is our core intervention or is our core instruction effective? And then how effective? And so when looking at that, we have sort of what effective means, and it's sort of defined in the slide there, but also then we sort of highlighted where it is not. And so these are like, ooh, these are targets for us that we know there's some space in first grade, especially for core to be better, and also in kindergarten. So it's like, which one are we going to focus on? Since this one is in both, probably first grade. So after they sort of do that deep dive and look into their data, and they sort of say, oh, it looks like especially, hold on, sorry, I have another meeting in 15 minutes. Okay, to attend to the quality of the core instruction at all grades, but especially based on data, it's first grade that they really want to set a goal on. Then they look at they go through the rest of the worksheet, which question 3 and 4 are really more around intervention. And they've noticed that there's some space in second grade intervention data and first grade intervention data, again, based on the question and then what the answer should be. So when they work through those, they find out, okay, where are we strongest? Where are we weakest? Where we're weakest, we're going to set a goal. And then there's one last question around intervention, and that one also happens to be second grade. So you'll notice it was second grade, first grade, second grade. Since they already have a goal around core instruction in first grade, they're going to do intervention for second grade. So that's sort of where they're going to focus and write their other goal in.
Sarah, I had a question.
Oh, yeah.
So we have, in our district, we have like grade-wise local goals. So you're not saying that every grade needs a math, a literacy, and another goal. You're just saying that the district.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, you got it. we have the sub-measure worksheet, which can dig down a little bit more. And at this point, the LEA can determine, you know, sort of where some holes are and why. And be thinking about, okay, do we want to set a goal on a sub-measure or do we want to set them on composite, which takes into account multiple things? Because if you look at this, for example, in first grade, second grade, and third grade, there's not just one thing they need to work on, there's multiple. So they probably, if there are multiple, are probably going to go with a goal around composite because they actually want to make improvements in both spaces, right? So with that being said, these are their priorities to set the goal on. Then we give them the goal setting language frame and template, which is also in the handouts for today. And the goal setting language is really just around by what date, which is generally the end of the school year, who's responsible. So that could be like first grade teachers, or you could just say Daggett School District, you know, that kind of thing. And then what's going to change and by how much, and then what evidence-based strategies are going to use to include, and then why, for what purpose. And so when we do the breakdown, we actually walk them through what this would look like and what it would be. The biggest piece that people mainly struggle with is the purple section. So we spend a lot more time in that purple section on what needs to change and how do we decide by how much. So when we're doing that breakdown, we talked about, okay, we said first grade is our lowest for core. We're going to make a first grade goal. So we said, yep, that's what we're going to do. Let's think about that. So when we looked at the data, we usually look at the last 3 years. Obviously, this is an old form. So we would look at 2021, 22. We can't look at 2020 or 2021. We can't look at 19, 20 because we didn't have end of year data. So then you'd also look at 18, 19. So like you're looking at the 3 most recent years that you have end of year data, which obviously we have that one skip year that we don't have data, but you just look at the other 3. So with that being said, we looked at, okay, from beginning of year to end of year, we went from 59 to 66, which is a 7% change, 57 to 65, an 8% change, and then another 8% change in the 18-19 school year. So if we take the average of the changes of what we moved from beginning of year to end of year, that's a 7.6 and we round up to 8%. So on average, we move kids 8% from beginning to end of year. So we're like, okay, that's the average. We know that's what's possible because we've looked at the average of 3 years of data. Then we look at adding 3 to 5%, because if we just go with the average, we already know that's possible and what you're doing without focusing on it. So now that we're really going to focus down our efforts on those spaces, it's a 3 to 5%. So that means we could choose anywhere from an 11%, a 12%, or a 13% goal. And so it's just increase the percentage of first graders on a Canadian screen composite from beginning of year to end of year by 11%. So that's the sort of framework that we work off of. And so that's the goal statement. So we're saying by June 1st, the LEA will, and this is what they're going to do. And then how they're going to provide job embedded coaching and support and professional learning. They're going to do observations and do feedback and gather information explicitly on phonemic awareness and phonics, right? So this is just an example. And then the why. Why? Because they want to reduce the percentage of students who are not mastering PSF or non-sensory fluency and who are not at benchmark at the end of first grade. So it's taking them back to why are we focusing on this goal? Because our data said, here are some areas where we're really weak and we want to improve. So then they have the entire example goal and we color code it just so they are aware of where we're gathering the different pieces, right? So then we walk them through a we do, and we do another example with them so that they can see what we're doing. So again, we're looking at data to determine what kind of goal we need to set. And this example focuses on that second grade intervention goal that we talked about, again, based on our data. So here's the example. We have to fill in our information. We filled it in, the average was 26. We add the 3 to 5, and so we can write our goal for either 29, 30, or 31. They decided to write it for 30. So we're walking them through that same process again, using the same template. So they already have their data. They can have these discussions right at the table and set those goals right away if they want to. And then we just help them again by filling out the example wording. Any questions on that before I go to just the last few slides? So we're basing it off of data, looking at the average of the last 3 years and then adding 3 to 5% so we can keep moving forward and keep improving. Okay. If there's a maintenance goal, so what that means is they can set a goal if they notice, let's say they start the beginning of year at 60% of kids are reading or at or above benchmark, 60%. And then they notice every year at end of year, they go down 10% and they're at 50, which is like, whoo, that is not good, right? So then in that case, they don't set a negative goal, right? We're not into setting negative goals. That's just a bad idea. I can't imagine having the conversation with a parent and be like, yeah, we set negative goals here. They'd be like, what? My kid's not going to school. And so, so because of that, we call it a maintenance goal, where the goal is actually just to maintain that 60 from beginning to end of year, because their data is showing that they're not successful in that space. And we want to at least maintain. And then once we maintain, then of course we can start adding more and more and going to that 3 to 5% change. But if we can't maintain, then that has to be the goal first. So we do allow maintenance goals if the data is showing it's a necessity. And again, this is the handout that's actually in there. It has the template as well as the language frame that they can use to write their goals. And then next year, it's the same process, except math. Well, it'll be the first year that they're ever setting a local math goal. And so because they only have 1 year of data, there's no averaging, because it's like, this is it. And so once they know this is it, they'll be adding 3 to 5%. And then of course, next year they'll have 2 years that they can average and add 3 to 5%. And eventually we'll get to the 3 years like we do with literacy. So it'll be the same process. It's just as we add years of math data, then our average will be even more strong, right? It'll be better and better. Any questions on the goal setting? You're in brain overload. You've gotten a ton of information this meeting.
I have a question. It's not, I mean, it's just an out there question, but has the state ever thought about, or have we ever, or would we ever like move to, instead of comparing year to year, like move the data up so that we're comparing apples to apples as for the most part, as opposed to so that, I mean, in general, like a good percentage of those students are the ones that made that 10% growth, with that data would follow them. Is that ever something that?
I see what you mean. Yes. So the rationale for not going we'll call it like a cohort, I guess, line is generally because we can't promise, and we have some, especially charter schools or small rural areas that have a lot of influx. Even Granite and Salt Lake City School District, the students they have the next year are not the same students they had. So it would be a real downfall, and it would be inequitable for all of those LEAs. And we want to be beneficial and mindful to everyone that's more inequitable of a space. And so because of that, that's why those goals have not been something that have been approved or allowed. So I'm really glad you brought that up, because I didn't have it in the slides, and I should have. Any other questions?
That was really helpful. Thank you so much, Sarah.
Yeah, you're welcome. Absolutely. So we did record it, like I said, so I'll send it out in case there's something you want to look at a second time. Like if you want to look at Sid's piece around RISE, and you maybe even want to share that with some teachers, you're welcome to. You're always welcome to share, whatever information we share, you're welcome to share as you wish. And so thanks so much for being with me today and hanging out. And I will tell Molly that you all said hello. And I'm pretty sure she'll be able to join us next time. So thank you all for your engagement. You guys are amazing, and just so grateful to get to celebrate your accomplishments with you every month, and then answer questions and support you in any way that I can. So if you have things that you want to see for April, please shoot an email to Molly or myself or both of us, and we're happy to bring those things to the table. And if you think of even questions based off of what you're receiving, once you maybe share some of this information with your LEAs, shoot those our way too, and we're happy to support.
Thank you.
Yep. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a great afternoon. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks.